Hi, Porter. It's Mrs. Curry here. If you're in my class, you know that we're working on the BFG novel study. BFG was written by Roald Dahl, and it's one of my favorite books to teach at the end of the school year. Today, I'm going to be reading chapters 1 and 2 and also going through some of the lessons that I talked about in our class Zoom. This is a great resource here on YouTube to check back in to see if there's anything you may have missed from today's lesson. So if you didn't join us on Zoom or you want to just double check on our lessons today, this is a great resource. So before we get started, you're going to need a couple of things today. You're going to need your student packet. It's the bigger of the packets that was sent home to you. And you're also going to need your vocabulary packet. Finally, you're going to need your composition notebook. And just like our composition notebook in science, how in the back of our book we make a glossary, we're going to continue to do that today with our vocabulary words for BFG. So turn to the back of your book, very back here, and you're going to write BFG vocab. And we're going to learn 3 words today. So I'm going to give you a second to go grab your book. Pause the video so that you don't miss out. Okay, so you've come back now with your book. We're going to learn 3 new vocabulary words. In your vocabulary packet, you have a page in your packet that has all of your vocabulary words written on really nice index cards that you can cut out to help you memorize the vocab. Today, we're going to learn 3 words. The first word is hesitated. Can you say the word hesitated? Great job. Hesitated means to pause. Our next word is peering. And you can see this little guy. Can you say peering? Awesome job. Peering means to peek or to look. Finally, our last word is longed. And it's a verb and it means desired or to wish. Can you say longed? Great job. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to write this right in the back of your notebook. So I've written them up here. And now I want you to write them right in the back of your notebook, just like we've done for our science notebook. So you're going to write hesitated means paused. Longed means desired or wished. Peering means peeking or looking. So go ahead and pause our video right now so that you can write these in the back of your book. Great job. You've written them now. We're going to jump right on into the BFG. Now, you're going to need your student packet in front of you. Open up your student packet to turn to page 1 and 2. Before we get started, you're going to take a look at the first part of page 1. It says quick write. Now, we do this before we start reading. It kind of gets our mind moving and our thoughts getting going. Our quick write today says, have you ever been awake in the middle of the night when everybody else is asleep? What did you do? What is it like? I want you to think about that. What was it like if you were ever awake in the middle of the night? Were you scared? Was it quiet? Was it creepy? How did it feel? Write it down right here. Okay, now that you've written that down, we're going to get started on our BFG packet today. So I'm going to read the first 2 chapters, and your job after you've read all of the chapters is you're going to complete pages 1 and 2 and upload them to Seesaw. So you're going to have some true-false questions, some vocab questions, some close reading questions, and then some beyond questions. Those are some questions on grammar. So you want to make sure you do that and take a picture to upload to Seesaw. All right. The BFG, Chapter 1, The Witching Hour. Sophie couldn't sleep. A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right onto her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to doze off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room onto her face. The house was absolutely silent. No voices came up from downstairs. There were no footsteps on the floor above either. The window behind the curtain was wide open, but no one was walking on the pavement outside. No cars went by on the street. Not the tiniest sound could be heard anywhere. Sophie knew. Sophie had never known such a silence. So there she is sleeping. Perhaps, she told herself, this is what they call the witching hour. The witching hour, somebody had once whispered to her, was a very special moment in the middle of the night when every child and every grown-up was in a deep, deep sleep, and all of the dark things came out from hiding and had the world to themselves. The moonbeam was brighter than ever on Sophie's pillow. She decided to get out of bed and close the gap in the curtains. You got punished if you were caught out of bed after lights out. Even if you had to go to the lavatory, that was not accepted as an excuse, and they punished you just the same. Now, lavatory is a really fancy word for bathroom. We use that word here in America, but it's also seen in England, where this book kind of takes place. But there was no one about now. Sophie was sure of that. She reached out for her glasses that lay on the chair beside her. They had steel rims and very thick lenses, and she could hardly see a thing without them. She put them on and she slipped out of bed and tiptoed over to the window. When she reached the curtains, Sophie hesitated. She longed to duck underneath them and lean out the window to see what the world looked like now that the witching hour was at hand. She listened again. Everywhere it was deathly still. The longing to look out became so strong she couldn't resist it. Quickly, she ducked under the curtains and leaned out the window. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well seemed completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked, like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road, she could see Mrs. Rance's shop, where you bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic. It didn't look real. There was something dim and misty about that, too. Sophie allowed her eye to travel further and further down the street. Suddenly, she froze. There was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black, something tall and black, something very tall and very black and very thin. That's the end of chapter 1. Make a prediction. What do you think was coming down the street? Great job. Let's keep reading. Chapter 2. Who? It wasn't a human. It couldn't be. It was 4 times as tall as the tallest human. It was so tall its head was higher than the upstairs windows of the houses. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat, like her whole body, was frozen with fright. This was the witching hour. All right, the tall black figure was coming her way. It was keeping very close to the houses across the street, hiding in the shadowy places where there was no moonlight. On and on it came nearer and nearer, but it was moving in spurts. It would stop, then it would move on, then it would stop again. But what on earth was it doing? Aha! Sophie could see now what it was up to. It stopped in front of each house. It would stop and peer into the upstairs window of each house in the street. It actually had to bend down to peer into the upstairs window. That's how tall it was. It would stop and peer in, and then it would slide into the next house and stop again and peer in, and so on all along down the street. It was much closer now, and Sophie could see it more clearly. Looking at it carefully, she decided it had to be some type of person. Obviously, it was not a human. But it was definitely a person. A giant person, perhaps. Sophie stared hard across the misty moonlit street. The giant, if that's what he was wearing a long black cloak. In one hand, he was holding what looked like a very long, thin trumpet, and in the other hand, he held a large suitcase. The giant had stopped now right in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gucci's house. The Guccis had a greengrocer's shop in the middle of High Street, and the family lived above the shop. The 2 Gucci children slept in the upstairs front room. Sophie knew that. The giant was peering through the window into the room where Michael and Jane Gucci were sleeping. From across the street, Sophie watched and held her breath. She saw the giant step back a pace and put the suitcase down on the pavement. He bent over and opened the suitcase. He took something out of it. It looked like a glass jar, one of those square ones with a screw top. He unscrewed the top of the jar and poured what was in it into the end of the very long trumpet-shaped thing. Sophie watched, trembling. She saw the giant straighten up again, and she saw him poke the trumpet into the open upstairs window of the room where the Gucci children were sleeping. She saw the giant take a deep breath and, whoof, he blew into the trumpet. No noise came out, but it was obvious to Sophie that whatever had been in the jar had now been blown into through the trumpet into the Gucci children's bedroom. What could it be? As the giant withdrew the trumpet from the window and bent down to pick up the suitcase, he happened to turn his head and glance across the street. In the moonlight, Sophie caught a glimpse of an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears. The nose was as sharp as a knife, and above the nose there were two bright, flashing eyes, and the eyes were staring straight at Sophie. There was a fierce and devilish look about them. Sophie gave out a yelp and pulled back from the window. She flew across the dormitory and jumped into her bed and hid under the blanket. And there she crouched, still as a mouse and tingling all over. And that's the end of chapter 2. And here's a picture of that big figure, the dark figure trying to look into the houses down the street. That's the end of chapter 2. We'll be back next week for more BFG read alouds and novel study. So your assignment today is to continue to work on pages 1 and 2 in your packet. Remember, you have some fill in the blank vocab pages, some true and false questions, some comprehension questions that need to be answered in full sentences, as well as some grammar. When you're finished with this, make sure that you upload it and put it right into Seesaw so that I can see what you're doing. If you're just following along to read BFG with us, awesome. We can't wait to see you next week. Bye, guys.